Marcus Chen inhaled the recycled air of the Zephyrian Academy's grand reception hall and felt a deep, ancestral disappointment. The air was perfect. Too perfect. Filtered to within an atom of its life, scrubbed of all personality, it tasted of nothing. It was the atmospheric equivalent of a blank wall. He looked around at the hall itself, a soaring space of gently curving, self-luminous walls and floors that seemed to flow like liquid silver under his boots. It was impressive, a testament to the Zephyrians' mastery of architecture and materials science. It was also sterile enough to perform open-heart surgery on the floor, a tall, chitinous being glided towards him. This was Administrator Tiklize, whose dossier Marcus had skimmed on the long, boring journey from the Sol system. Tiklize was a Cathar, a species that resembled a 7-foot-tall praying mantis sculpted from obsidian. 2 of its 4 multi-jointed arms were tucked neatly behind its back, while the forward pair were steepled in a gesture that was apparently meant to be welcoming. Its multifaceted eyes, shimmering with 1,000 tiny points of green light, took in Marcus's comparatively short, soft form. Human Marcus Chen. The administrator's voice was a series of precise, melodic clicks and whistles, translated into flawless Terran standard by the small disc pinned to Marcus's collar. On behalf of the Zephyrian Interspecies Academy, it is my distinct honor to welcome you to Kepler 442b. Your participation in this cultural exchange is a momentous occasion. Glad to be here, Administrator, Marcus said, offering a hand. Tiklize looked at the appendage for a long, analytical moment before extending one of its own slender, 3-fingered claws to gently tap Marcus's palm. The gesture was like shaking hands with a bundle of chilled scalpels. Just Marcus is fine. As you wish, just Marcus, Tiklize replied, retracting its limb. The translator, for all its sophistication, occasionally missed the nuances of human syntax. Your quarters have been prepared. We have taken great care to simulate a Class M environment. Nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, 1.02 standard gravity, and a full nutritional profile synthesized to your species, specific dietary requirements. Marcus's smile became a little tighter. Synthesized, you say? Fantastic. He already knew what that meant. He'd been on enough off-world postings to recognize the galactic euphemism for flavorless nutrient paste. His pessimism was confirmed an hour later in the Academy's communal refectory. The vast, silent chamber was filled with dozens of species, each consuming their sustenance in their own unique way. Gelatinous blorgs absorbed nutrient-rich vapor through pulsating membranes, crystalline silicoids scraped mineral dust from charged platters, and the Cathar, like Tiklize, delicately consumed small, perfect cubes of solidified algae. In front of Marcus sat a bowl of beige paste. He dipped a utensil into it. The consistency was somewhere between oatmeal and wet cement. He lifted it to his nose. It smelled of absolutely nothing. With a sigh of resignation born from long experience, he took a bite. The taste was an insult to his entire evolutionary lineage. It was the culinary equivalent of static. It wasn't bad, it was just a void where flavor was supposed to be. It provided calories, vitamins, and minerals with brutal efficiency, but it offered no joy, no comfort, no soul. Across the table, a young Zelosian cadet named Xyler, who looked like a bipedal sapling with wide, curious leaf-like photoreceptors, was watching him. Is the human nutritional supplement satisfactory? Xyler's translated voice was soft, like rustling leaves. Marcus swallowed the mouthful with a grimace. Let me put it this way, kid. My ancestors spent 200,000 years climbing to the top of the food chain, fighting saber-toothed tigers and inventing fire, just so I wouldn't have to eat something like this. Xyler's leafy appendages drooped in confusion. I do not understand. The supplement contains 100% of the required biomatter for optimal human function. Its efficiency is unparalleled. Efficiency isn't the point, Marcus said, pushing the bowl away. Food is supposed to be an experience. It's about texture, aroma, flavor. It's about the sizzle of fat hitting a hot pan, the smell of wood smoke, the satisfaction of eating something you tracked and brought down yourself. He turned in his seat and looked out the massive crystalline window that formed one entire wall of the refectory. Beyond the manicured, sterile grounds of the academy lay a world teeming with untamed life. A vast, Deep green forest stretched to the horizon, its canopy a riot of alien shapes and colors under the light of a slightly orange sun. The air, even seen through the triple-paned, radiation-shielded window, seemed to shimmer with humidity and pollen. It looked wild, dangerous, and to Marcus's trained eye, absolutely full of ingredients. "What's out there?" he asked, pointing a thumb towards the jungle. Teaklies, who had glided over to ensure the new exchange participant was settling in, followed his gaze. Its mandibles clicked with something that sounded suspiciously like a shudder. "That, just Marcus, is the verdant maze. It is a zone of extreme caution, uncontrolled, uncatalogued, and profoundly lethal. All Academy personnel are forbidden from entering under any circumstances." "Lethal how?" Marcus asked, his interest piqued. "Big predators." "Among other myriad threats," Teaklies confirmed. "The apex predator of this continent is a creature we have designated the Glimmerfang, a Class 9 predatory organism. It is a creature of terrifying speed, strength, and cunning. Its integument is composed of a silicate lattice that can refract light, rendering it nearly invisible until it strikes. Its hunting success rate against our survey drones is an astonishing 87%. Marcus leaned forward, a slow grin spreading across his face. He wasn't hearing a warning, he was hearing a recipe. "Class 9, huh? You ever try eating one?" Teaklies froze, its forward limbs twitching in agitation. The concept was so alien, so fundamentally wrong, that the translator seemed to struggle for a moment. "Eat a Glimmerfang? One does not eat a catastrophic failure of ecosystem management. One avoids it, vehemently." Marcus stood up, the decision already made. The bland paste had been the final straw. He was a chef, a hunter. This was an affront to his very being. "Administrator," he announced to the silent refectory, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I appreciate your hospitality and your concern for my nutritional well-being. But I can't eat this culinary apology. Tomorrow I'm going into that forest, and I'm going to cook us all a real meal." A wave of stunned silence rolled through the hall. The blorgs momentarily stopped absorbing vapor. The silicoids paused their scraping. Xyler's leaf crest stood straight up in alarm. Teaklies' multifaceted eyes widened to their full extent. "That is inadvisable. It is forbidden. The protocols are explicit." Marcus just shrugged, clapping the administrator on one of its hard, bony shoulders. The contact made Teaklies flinch. "Protocols are for people who don't know how to start a fire. Don't worry, I'll bring back enough for everyone. I'm thinking a nice slow roast, maybe a barbecue." He walked out of the refectory, leaving behind a room full of horrified, confused, and utterly speechless aliens. He was already mentally cataloging his gear. His favorite hunting knife, the compact kinetic rifle he was allowed to bring for ceremonial purposes. And most importantly, the vacuum-sealed pouch of his own special spice blend. Tomorrow was going to be a good day. The next morning, the Academy's main airlock chamber felt less like a departure point and more like the setting for an intervention. Administrator Teaklies stood flanked by two other Cathar instructors, their postures radiating disapproval. A small crowd of cadets, including Xyler, hovered at a respectful distance, whispering amongst themselves in a dozen different alien languages. "Just Marcus, I must formally implore you to reconsider this course of action," Teaklies said, its translated voice tight with strain. "We have compiled a threat assessment dossier for your review." One of the other instructors activated a holographic display in the air. A three-dimensional image of the Glimmerfang appeared. It was even more impressive than Marcus had imagined. The creature was a quadruped, built low to the ground like a panther, but its body was covered in shimmering, crystalline plates that shifted in color with the light. It had 6 glowing, predatory eyes and a jaw that unhinged to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth. The display helpfully listed its attributes: ambush predator, camouflage index, 9.810, claw bite force, 12,000 newtons, observed sprint speed, 110 km/h. "That's a big cat," Marcus noted appreciatively, slinging a well-worn pack over his shoulder. The pack contained a bedroll, a water purifier, a medkit, and the essential cooking gear. A small, collapsible grill grate, a fire starter, and his spices. His rifle was slung over his other shoulder, looking decidedly low-tech next to the gleaming walls of the airlock. "It is not a cat," T-Kleis's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. It is a biological weapon system that evolved by chance. We have also included footage of its standard hunting techniques. The hologram shifted to show drone footage. A glimmer fang, a ripple in the air, suddenly materialized and eviscerated something that looked like a six-legged deer in a blur of motion. The recording was clinical and brutal. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Okay, so it's quick. Good to know. Don't want to overcook the meat. It'll get tough. The three Cathar instructors exchanged glances of pure, unadulterated disbelief. It was as if Marcus was speaking a language their translators simply couldn't process, a language of casual, primal confidence that had no place in their ordered, sanitized world. Furthermore, the third instructor chimed in, its voice a lower-pitched series of clicks. The flora is as dangerous as the fauna. There are multiple species of neurotoxic fungi, paralytic pollens, and carnivorous plants capable of trapping and digesting a creature of your biomass. Right. Don't eat the glowing mushrooms unless I cook them first. Got it, Marcus said, checking the action on his rifle. It was smooth and familiar in his hands. He trusted its simple, reliable mechanics far more than he would any energy weapon. Seeing they were making no headway, T-Kleis resorted to its final option, a direct order. Human Marcus Chen, as administrator of this academy and the senior official on site for the Interspecies Cultural Exchange Compact, I formally forbid you from entering the hazardous zone. Marcus turned to face the administrator directly. He wasn't smiling anymore. His expression was calm, steady, and utterly immovable. With all due respect, Administrator, our agreement states that I am here to share my culture. And my culture, for the last few million years, has involved walking into dangerous places and finding things to put on a fire. You want to understand humans. This is how you understand humans. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a lunch to catch. He turned and strode towards the outer airlock door. It hissed open in his path. For a moment, no one moved. Then, as the thick, humid air of the alien world outside washed into the chamber, T-Kleis made a sharp, decisive gesture. Security, activate surveillance drone Epsilon. Maintain a continuous audiovisual feed on the human, full biological and atmospheric telemetry, and have a medical team on standby. The administrator's voice was grim. And a sanitation unit. Marcus stepped out of the academy and into the wild. The door hissed shut behind him, sealing him out of the sterile, predictable world and into the vibrant chaos of the verdant maze. The air was thick and sweet, heavy with the scent of alien blossoms, damp earth, and decaying life. The sounds were a symphony of clicks, chirps, and deep-throated calls that vibrated in his chest. A canopy of colossal trees, their bark iridescent and their leaves the size of dinner plates, blotted out the sky, plunging the forest floor into a perpetual emerald twilight. He took a deep breath, the rich, organic air filling his lungs. It felt like coming home. A smile finally broke across his face. This was infinitely better than nutrient paste. He unslung his rifle, held it in a comfortable low-ready position, and began to walk, his boots sinking slightly into the soft, mossy ground. He moved with a quiet, efficient grace, his eyes constantly scanning, his senses wide open. He wasn't a tourist. He was a predator in a new hunting ground. Back in the Academy's central command center, a room normally reserved for monitoring orbital traffic and planetary weather systems, a crisis was unfolding. On the main view screen, a high-definition image from drone Epsilon showed Marcus from a high, circling vantage point. He was moving deeper into the forest, disappearing and reappearing through the dense canopy. Smaller screens to the side displayed his biometrics, heart rate, respiration, body temperature, and atmospheric readings from his immediate vicinity. His cardiac rhythm is stable, a Cathar technician reported, its voice filled with a sense of wonder. 82 beats per minute, that is a resting state reading for his species. Impossible, T-Kleis muttered, leaning forward, its multifaceted eyes glued to the screen. He is surrounded by mortal threats. His adrenaline levels should be catastrophic. Xyler, the young Zalosian cadet, had somehow managed to get access to the command center. He stood near the back, his leafy photoreceptors wide with a mixture of terror and fascination. Administrator, the drone just tagged a patch of Somnus volvens directly in his path. The sleep vine. Its pollen can induce a comatose state in seconds. On the screen, Marcus approached a curtain of thick, purple vines dangling from a branch. He stopped, sniffed the air, then wrinkled his nose. Instead of collapsing, he simply gave the vines a wide berth, making a detour without breaking his stride. How did he detect it? The technician asked, baffled. Its pollen is an odorless, complex polypeptide. Our sensors barely registered it. He smelled it, Teaklai said, the clicks of its speech slow and deliberate, as if it were trying to understand a nonsensical paradox. An hour passed. Marcus moved with an unnerving purposefulness. He paused to examine tracks in the mud that sent shivers of alarm through the command center staff, tracks they identified as belonging to a skitter boar, a heavily armored omnivore known for its foul temper and territorial aggression. Marcus merely poked one of the tracks with the toe of his boot and moved on, angling his path slightly. Then, the drone's audio sensors picked up a low growl. The technician quickly isolated the sound, amplifying it. A creature burst from the undergrowth. It was a skitter boar, a hulking beast the size of a small ground car, covered in thick, overlapping plates of bone-like armor. It had 6 short, powerful legs and a pair of wickedly curved tusks. It lowered its head and charged, its roar echoing through the forest. In the command center, Xyler let out a small, terrified squeak. Teaklai's braced its limbs against the console. Medical team, prepare for emergency retrieval. Mark the coordinates. On the screen, Marcus didn't run. He didn't even seem startled. He simply turned to face the charge, raised his rifle, and waited. The boar closed the distance with terrifying speed. At the last possible second, when the creature was barely 10 meters away, Marcus fired a single shot. It wasn't aimed at the head or the body, which were heavily armored. The shot struck the soft ground just in front of the charging beast's lead legs. Dirt and rocks sprayed up into the boar's face. Blinded and surprised, the creature bellowed in fury and swerved, its momentum carrying it past Marcus and into a thicket of giant, thorny ferns. It thrashed for a moment, then extricated itself, snorted in frustration, and lumbered off in another direction, apparently deciding the strange, calm biped wasn't worth the effort. Marcus lowered his rifle and calmly continued on his way as if he'd just shoot a stray dog. The command center was silent. Did he just intimidate a skitter boar? Xyler whispered. His chosen tactic was illogical, the technician stated, running diagnostics. A direct confrontation with a charging Class 4 herbivore should have resulted in his immediate pulverization. The probability of success for his chosen action was less than 3%. And yet, Teaklai said softly, its gaze fixed on the small, soft-skinned figure on the screen, it worked. The administrator was beginning to feel a strange, unfamiliar emotion. It wasn't just concern anymore. It was a profound, unsettling sense of confusion, as if the fundamental laws of the universe were being casually rewritten by a visitor from a backwater planet. Marcus, oblivious to the existential crisis he was causing, continued his trek. He was enjoying himself. He found a stream of clear, cold water and refilled his canteen after purifying it. He identified a type of large, meaty mushroom growing on the side of a fallen log. He carefully cut one open, sniffed it, then rubbed a small piece on his wrist, waiting to see if there was any reaction. When there was none, he harvested a half-dozen of the largest ones, stowing them in his pack. To the aliens watching, he had just handled a fungus known for causing severe dermal irritation, but Marcus's Terran biology, hardened by millennia of coexisting with Earth's diverse and often toxic ecosystem, simply wasn't bothered. Finally, he found what he was looking for. A small, natural clearing on a slight rise, bordered on one side by the stream and on the other by a sheer rock face pitted with caves. It was defensible, had access to water, and a good supply of dry, fallen wood. It was the perfect place to set up camp. He dropped his pack and began to gather firewood. In the command center, the technician brought up a topographical map and overlaid it with known wildlife territorial data. A series of red circles and threat vectors appeared on the screen, and they all converged on one point. The technician's manipulators trembled slightly as it pointed to the map. Administrator, according to our data, that clearing it is the central denning area for the local Glimmerfang pack. Teaklai stared at the screen, where Marcus was now cheerfully arranging sticks into a neat pile. He has chosen to make his camp in the Glimmerfang's very home. Not just camp, administrator, the technician said, its voice barely a whisper as it zoomed in on the drone feed. Marcus had pulled the collapsible metal grate from his pack and was setting it up over his pile of wood. He is preparing to cook. The absurdity of the situation was a physical weight in the room. The human had walked into the most dangerous place on the continent. A place so lethal that the academy was built miles away behind energy shields and was preparing to have a picnic. The sheer, unmitigated gall was so far beyond their comprehension that it bordered on madness. Xyler, ever the curious one, posed the question that was on everyone's mind. Is it possible that the human does not experience the emotion you call fear? Teaklies watched as Marcus struck a spark, and a small, cheerful fire sprang to life in the heart of the Glimmerfang's lair. The human warmed his hands over the flames, a look of simple contentment on his face. "Oh, I believe he experiences it," the administrator said, its voice a low thrum of awe and terror. "I simply believe his species and mine have a fundamentally different understanding of who should be afraid of whom." The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, alien shadows through the forest. The light caught the high canopy, painting it in shades of orange and violet. In the clearing, Marcus's fire crackled merrily, a small beacon of warmth and defiance against the encroaching twilight. The air grew cooler, and the sounds of the jungle shifted from the chirps and calls of day creatures to the deeper, more sinister rustles and clicks of nocturnal hunters. Marcus was unconcerned. He had sliced the large mushrooms he'd foraged and was slowly grilling them over the hot embers. A rich, earthy, savory aroma began to fill the clearing, a scent utterly alien to this world, but familiar to any human who'd ever cooked over an open flame. He hummed a tune from an old earth rock band, turning the mushroom steaks with a pair of tongs. This was just an appetizer. The main course was still out there. In the Academy's command center, the atmosphere was thick with a tension that was almost palpable. The drone had switched to its low-light thermal imaging mode. Marcus's fire glowed as a bright yellow-white heart in the center of the screen, with his own warm, orange silhouette moving around it. The surrounding forest was a cool dark blue, but now other shapes were beginning to appear. "Multiple thermal signatures detected," the technician announced, its voice strained. "Perimeter of the clearing, 4-No-5 contacts, low to the ground. Moving with coordinated patterns, they are surrounding him." "It's the pack," Teaklies breathed. "They've been drawn by the light and the scent." On the screen, the heat signatures crept closer, flowing between the trees like pools of liquid heat. They were using the terrain, moving with an unnatural silence. One by one, they positioned themselves, forming a tightening circle around the oblivious human and his fire. Xyler pressed a fragile, twig-like hand to his mouth slit. He has to see them, he must know they are there. But Marcus gave no sign. He casually flipped a mushroom slice, his movements relaxed and economical. He took a small flask from his pocket, unscrewed the cap, and took a sip. To the watching aliens, it was an act of inexplicable, suicidal nonchalance. To Marcus, it was just a little whiskey to ward off the evening chill. Then the first Glimmerfang revealed itself. It didn't step into the light. The light simply bent around it. A patch of darkness near the edge of the clearing seemed to shimmer, to distort, and then the creature resolved into terrifying clarity. It was the Pack Alpha, larger than the others, its crystalline armor catching the firelight in 1,000 glittering, deadly facets. Its 6 eyes, glowing with a faint internal luminescence, were fixed on Marcus. A low, guttural growl like grinding stone vibrated through the drone's audio sensors. The command center held its collective breath. This was it. The moment their reckless, baffling guest would finally meet the violent end they had all predicted. The Glimmerfang Alpha took a slow, deliberate step into the clearing. Then another. The other members of the pack remained hidden in the shadows, ready to spring the trap. The Alpha was coiled, a spring of pure predatory power, ready to launch itself across the clearing in a fraction of a second. Marcus finally looked up from his cooking. He didn't jump. He didn't scream. He saw the 10-foot-long, invisible-skinned, six-eyed death machine 20 yards away, and he smiled. "There you are," he said, his voice calm and conversational. "I was wondering when you'd show up. Smelled the cooking, did you? Sorry, pal, this is just for me. He set his tongs down, picked up his rifle, and leaned it against the rock behind him, well within reach. But he made no move to aim it. Instead, he picked up a thick, sturdy branch from his firewood pile. He pushed one end into the heart of the fire until it began to glow and smolder. The Glimmerfang Alpha let out another, louder growl, a clear challenge. It lowered its head, its powerful muscles bunching. It was about to charge. Administrator, his heart rate has elevated, the technician reported, its voice a high-pitched series of clicks. 130 beats per minute. He is finally experiencing fear, Tiklize exclaimed, a strange sense of relief washing over it. The human was not a god after all. He was mortal. But on the screen, Marcus's actions were not those of a creature experiencing fear. He was not retreating. He was not cowering. He pulled the burning branch from the fire. It was now a primitive, glowing torch, trailing smoke and embers. He held it up not like a weapon but like a signal, and he took a step towards the Glimmerfang. "Easy now," Marcus said, his voice a low, soothing baritone, the kind one might use on a nervous horse or a large, territorial dog. "I'm not here for a fight, I'm just passing through, but this is my fire. You need to understand that." He took another step forward. The Glimmerfang, which had never in its evolutionary history encountered a prey item that advanced on it with a burning stick, paused its charge. A flicker of confusion entered its glowing eyes. It let out a questioning snarl. Marcus kept walking, slowly, deliberately, holding the torch out in front of him. He wasn't aggressive, but he was utterly without fear. He was claiming the space, his body language projecting a sense of ownership and authority that transcended species. He was the master of the fire, and by extension, the master of the clearing. This was a language that every predator understood. He stopped about 15 feet from the Alpha. The heat from his torch washed over the creature's face. It blinked, its sensitive eyes unused to the direct glare and smoke. It took an involuntary step back. In that instant, the entire dynamic of the confrontation shifted. The predator had flinched. Marcus pressed his advantage. He took another, bolder step, and then he did something that caused the command center to erupt in a cacophony of panicked clicks, whistles, and terrified gasps. He yelled. It wasn't a scream of terror. It was a roar, a deep primal territorial bellow that came from his diaphragm, full of aggression and dominance. "Get out of here, Gon, get!" He waved the burning torch aggressively. A shower of sparks flew through the air, and a few landed on the Glimmerfang's snout. The creature yelped, a surprisingly high-pitched sound of pain and surprise, and scrambled backward, shaking its head. The human, this small, soft-skinned being, roared again and charged forward a few steps, brandishing the fire like a judgment. The Glimmerfang Alpha, the Class 9 apex predator, the terror of Kepler 442b, turned and fled. It melted back into the shadows, a shimmering distortion in the darkness. A moment later, the other thermal signatures on the drone's display winked out as the rest of the pack followed their rooted leader into the deep jungle. Marcus stood alone in the clearing, breathing a little heavily. He watched the forest for a moment longer, then casually tossed the torch back onto the fire. He walked back to his grill, picked up his tongs, and calmly flipped a mushroom slice. His heart rate, as displayed on the biometric monitor in the silent, shell-shocked command center, was already dropping back below 90. For a full minute, nobody in the command center spoke. They stared at the screen, at the image of the human peacefully tending his appetizer in the clearing he had just claimed from the planet's most feared predator, using nothing but a stick and a shout. They were trying to process an event that their combined knowledge of xenobiology, sociology, and tactical analysis had deemed a statistical impossibility. Finally, Tiklize broke the silence. Its voice was a barely audible series of clicks. "Technician," it said slowly, "run a comparative analysis. Search the galactic archives for any species that utilizes controlled combustion as a tool for predatory intimidation." The technician's claws flew across the console. Lights blinked, data scrolled. After a few seconds, the technician turned back, its multifaceted eyes wide. "There is only one administrator, a single, obscure Class 12 Deathworlder species from the Orion Arm. A species classified as persistently hazardous, but generally considered non-expansionist and thus low priority." "Display the designation," Tiklize commanded. On the main screen, next to the live feed of Marcus salting his mushrooms, a single entry appeared. Species human, homeworld Earth Terra, threat analysis co-evolved with megafauna and planetary extinction events, apex-level persistence predator, unique psychological attribute, pack bonds with other species. Warning: do not engage in territorial disputes. They perceive all controlled heat sources as theirs. Teakley's stared at the screen, at the words, and at the man. And for the first time, it began to understand. They hadn't invited a cook to their academy. They had invited a monster, and they had been offering him bland paste when he was used to feasting on nightmares. Marcus ate his mushrooms, which were delicious, and waited. He knew the Glimmerfangs would be back. Routing the Alpha was just the first step. He hadn't come out here for a snack. He had come out here for a hunt. The intimidation was just to set the terms of the engagement. Now they knew he wasn't easy prey. They would be more cautious, more cunning, and that's exactly what he wanted. He finished his appetizer and banked the fire, letting it die down to a bed of glowing red coals. He took his rifle, a thermal scope he'd attached, and a length of synthetic cord, and melted into the darkness at the edge of the clearing, climbing up onto a thick, low-hanging branch of a massive tree that gave him a clear view of the area. He settled in, his back against the trunk, and became perfectly still. The hunt was on. The drone, hovering silently hundreds of feet above, watched as the clearing became still and quiet, the only movement the slow swirl of smoke from the dying fire. In the command center, the tension ratcheted up again. He has extinguished the fire, Zyler noted. Why would he remove his only defense? He is not defending, Teakley's corrected, its voice grim. He is hunting. Hours passed. The alien moon, a large, pockmarked sphere of pale yellow, rose above the canopy, bathing the forest in its ethereal light. On the thermal feed, Marcus was a faint, warm patch against the cooler branch. He hadn't moved a muscle. His breathing was slow and even, his heart rate low. It was a state of patient, focused readiness that the Cathar, a species of ambush predators themselves, recognized with a dawning, professional respect. Then, a flicker of movement. A single Glimmerfang, not the alpha, but a younger, sleeker one, slunk into the clearing. It was using its camouflage, its form a watery ripple in the moonlight. It moved low to the ground, sniffing the air, its senses on high alert. It was clearly scouting, testing the humans' defenses. It crept towards the dead fire, towards Marcus's pack which he'd left on the ground as bait. It circled the pack, sniffing cautiously. It saw no sign of the human. Believing the strange creature had fled, it grew bolder. It nudged the pack with its nose. From the tree above, there was a single, soft thwump. It wasn't the loud crack of a conventional firearm. Marcus was using a subsonic round. The Glimmerfang collapsed without a sound. A neat, single hole drilled through its crystalline skull at the precise point where it was weakest. A spot he'd noticed on the holographic display back at the academy. Before the body had even stopped twitching, Marcus was sliding down from the tree. He moved with swift, silent efficiency. He dragged the creature to the center of the clearing, pulled out the long, sharp knife from the sheath on his belt, and began to work. The drone's camera zoomed in, its high-resolution lens capturing every detail. The command center watched in a state of horrified fascination as Marcus began to field-dress the Glimmerfang. His movements were practiced and precise. He was not a butcher hacking at a carcass. He was a surgeon. He skinned the creature with an expert's touch, peeling back the shimmering, crystalline hide. He separated the muscles, trimmed the fat, and carved out the prime cuts of meat. The loins, the tenderloins, the thick haunches. He handled the carcass with a kind of reverence, wasting nothing. He even removed some of the internal organs, setting the liver and heart aside. He is harvesting it, the technician said, stating the obvious because the reality was too much to process silently. Marcus worked for over an hour under the pale yellow moonlight. When he was done, he had a neat pile of exquisite-looking meat, a carefully rolled-up Glimmerfang hide, and a small pile of entrails he left for the scavengers. He rekindled the fire, adding fresh wood until it was burning bright and hot. He skewered the heart and liver on a green stick and roasted them over the open flame for a quick meal, his first real protein in days. The drone's atmospheric sensors went wild, registering a complex cascade of aromatic compounds released by the cooking meat. The smell, even translated into raw data, was intoxicating. Then, he began preparing for the main event. He took the large haunches and rubbed them down with his secret spice blend. He used the synthetic cord to rig a spit over the fire and mounted the massive cuts of meat to turn slowly over the coals. He took the tenderloins, sliced them into thick medallions, and laid them on the grill grate alongside the last of the mushrooms. The sun was just beginning to rise, its orange light filtering through the canopy, when he finished. The clearing was filled with the sounds of sizzling meat and the overwhelming, incredible smell of a primal barbecue. Marcus, covered in a light sheen of sweat and a few smears of Glimmerfang blood, looked at his handiwork and nodded in satisfaction. He packed up his gear, loaded the cooked meat onto a makeshift platter he fashioned from a large, sturdy piece of bark, rolled up the Glimmerfang pelt and tied it to his pack, and began the walk back to the academy. The return journey was uneventful. The forest, it seemed, had gotten the message. Nothing bothered him. The scent of cooked Glimmerfang that wafted from his platter was a more potent deterrent than any energy shield. When the academy came into view, a gleaming silver oasis in the sea of green, he saw a reception committee waiting for him at the airlock. Teaklies was there, along with the other instructors and a crowd of what looked like the entire student body. They weren't armed or armored. They were just watching. The airlock door hissed open as he approached. He strode into the sterile, climate-controlled environment, bringing the wild, smoky, savory smells of the forest with him. He was dirty, tired, and smelled of blood and wood smoke, a stark, visceral contrast to the pristine hall around him. He walked straight to the center of the crowd, hoisted the bark platter high, and announced, "Lunch is served." Silence. Every eye, mandible, and photoreceptor was fixed on the platter. On it lay heaps of glistening, perfectly cooked meat. The slow-roasted haunch had a dark, crispy crust, while the grilled medallions were seared with perfect grill marks, their juices still sizzling. The aroma was a physical force, a complex tapestry of smoke, spice, and roasted meat that promised a sensory experience utterly beyond their comprehension. Marcus took his knife, carved a thick slice from the roast, and held it out. Who's first? No one moved. They stared at the meat, the product of a Class 9 predator, and then at Marcus, the being who had turned it into a meal. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. Then a small figure pushed its way to the front. It was Xyler. The young Xylosian cadet looked up at Marcus, then at the piece of meat, its leaf crests trembling with a mixture of fear and an emotion that was far, far stronger. Curiosity. I will try it," Xyler said, its translated voice barely a whisper. Marcus grinned and offered the slice. Xyler hesitantly took it with its thin, twig-like fingers. For a moment it just held it, examining it. Then it brought the morsel to its mouth slit and took a small, tentative bite. Xyler's entire body went rigid. Its wide, leafy eyes dilated until they were huge, dark pools. Its leaf crests shot straight up, quivering. A soft, melodic chime, the Xylosian equivalent of a gasp of pure pleasure, echoed in the silent hall. The combination of flavors, the savory, iron-rich taste of the meat, the smoky char from the fire, the complex heat and fragrance of Marcus's earth-born spices, was an explosion of sensory data that its species had never before encountered. It was primal, complex, and utterly, transcendently delicious. Xyler devoured the rest of the slice in seconds and looked up at Marcus, its eyes shining with something akin to religious worship. "More," it chimed. That broke the spell. A silicoid hesitantly crunched a piece, its crystalline body flashing with brilliant colors. A blorg extended a pseudopod to absorb the juices, its gelatinous form wobbling in ecstasy. Teaklies itself stepped forward, took a piece with its delicate claws, and consumed it with a series of precise, analytical bites. Then its antennae drooped, its mandibles went slack, and it stood perfectly still for a full 10 seconds, processing the experience. By the spinning voids, Teaklies clicked, its translator filling the words with a sense of profound revelation. The flavor profile is exponential. Soon, a line had formed. Cadets and instructors alike, from a dozen different worlds, eagerly took pieces of the Glimmerfang roast. The hall, usually a place of quiet, ordered study, was filled with the sounds of joyful, ravenous eating. All notions of the Glimmerfang as an untouchable terror were being literally consumed, replaced by the universal truth of a perfectly cooked meal. Marcus stood back, watching the scene with a satisfied smile, leaning on his rifle. He had shared his culture. The official report filed by Administrator Tiklies was a masterpiece of understated bureaucratic language that completely failed to capture the glorious insanity of the preceding 24 hours. It mentioned a successful procurement of local biological samples for dietary analysis and an unorthodox but effective demonstration of human survival techniques. The unofficial report, however, traveled much faster. A garbled but enthusiastic comms message from Xyler to its brood cluster, describing the divine flesh of the shadow beast, tamed by the Firebringer from Terra, was accidentally broadcast on an open student network. From there, it went viral. Within a week, the Zephyrian Academy was flooded with inquiries. A delegation from the Granthan hegemony, a species of silicon-based gourmands who had grown bored with their diet of rare earths, offered a mining charter for a small moon in exchange for the human spice recipe. The High Command of the Sea-Thalian fleet, a race of proud warriors, requested Marcus's services to cater their next victory feast, believing that eating the flesh of a fearsome predator would grant them its spirit. A media conglomerate from Alpha Centauri offered him his own cooking show, Deathworld Grilling with Marcus Chen. Marcus sat in his quarters, which now had a permanent, pleasant aroma of wood smoke, looking at a datapad displaying a flood of ludicrously lucrative offers. Tiklies stood in the doorway, holding a new bowl. It wasn't beige paste. It was a bowl of freshly harvested local fruits that the botany department, inspired by Marcus, had finally dared to venture out and collect. "We have revised the Academy's nutritional program," Tiklies said, offering the bowl. "We were wondering if you might show us how to prepare them." Marcus looked from the bowl of alien fruit to the offers on his datapad. He was no longer just a cook in an exchange program. He was an ambassador, a pioneer, a culinary sensation. He had single-handedly created a new galactic market, the demand for authentic, dangerous, human-style cooking. They hadn't understood him. They had seen his soft skin, his lack of natural armor, and classified him as fragile. They had failed to realize that the most dangerous thing about a human isn't their claws or their teeth, but their ingenuity, their audacity, and their unshakable belief that anything that can be killed can also be grilled. He took an alien fruit that looked like a cross between a pineapple and an artichoke, turning it over in his hands. "Sure, I can show you," he said to Tiklies, a familiar predatory grin spreading across his face. "But first, we're going to need a bigger fire."